you, Michael and Chris. It's my dream to sing this song today. I think it sounded great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Chris even got us to figure out how to harmonize. So on this theme of garden and flowers and stalks, I have something to admit to you all this morning, and I know I'm still new here, but I have to get it off my chest. I am not a good gardener. And I know that is about tantamount to a cardinal sin of sorts at this church, but I needed to get it off my chest. Despite today's readings and meditation and flowery language that we've sprinkled throughout our service, I'm still working on keeping that jade plant on my back patio alive. I'm what you might call an aspirational gardener. Every time I kill a new basil plant or succulent, I rack my brain for what could have gone wrong. What is my problem? As you all probably know, it's actually really hard to kill a succulent. So after some reflection and really thinking about it and looking at that red-orange jade plant, I landed on my main issue: disconnection. Disconnection. Those little plants seem like tiny Rubik's Cubes to me. They're too difficult for me to figure out. I don't understand how they live and thrive and grow. We're just too different. But that's where I then thought and discovered in today's theme, and the theme of this month here at church, that I gotta draw the circle wider. Our readings today teach us that God, that Spirit, that grand connectedness are far more expansive and bright than we ever could imagine. Gibran writes, as we heard earlier, "Your daily life is your temple and your religion. Whenever you enter it, take with it your all." He encourages us to remember that the ripples of the Spirit are all around us. He says, "Look about you, and you shall see the Spirit playing with your children. Look into space. You'll see the Spirit walking in the cloud, outstretching arms in the lightning, and descending in rain. You shall see the Spirit smiling in flowers, then rising and waving his hands in trees." The creation around us has a lot to teach us if we're willing to see it. And this became really clear for me recently when a friend told me something new that he had learned that day. He said that in some biospheres, the plant life exists as a collective. So when one species or section of species has an overabundance of resources, and it notices that another section or another species has too little, that group of flowers or trees or grass, whatever it may be, will share that overabundance through its roots. Can you believe that? I know many of you here are environmentalists, scientists, and gardeners, and are thinking, yeah, duh, that's how it works. And I know it's really simple, unbelievably so, but just stick with me for one more second and think about it again. This flower has the ability to recognize it has more than enough, and it has the ability to share that resource with its neighbor, who might be 10 feet taller, 20 shades bluer, or much pricklier in texture. And it does it. It does it. It shares with other beings different from itself and its species merely because it can. No questions asked, no strings attached. And I think there's something beautiful about that, maybe something prophetic. When we pull back from some of the things we've been taught to expect in the world, whether that is that we are alone, that we're not good enough, that asking for help is wrong, we might just be surprised by what we find. When we trust in the world around us, when we trust in drawing that circle wider, we might just find a sense of connectedness, of spiritual calm, of a center. Our seventh UU principle calls us to respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are all part, which we share together each Sunday in our promise to our planet. And it's a wonderful recognition of the universalism that this tradition is partly named after. It's a recognition of that great love that holds us all in life, human and plant alike. And my friend's story about these amazing pockets of nature transported me to another time when I was able to really feel this principle of interconnectedness playing out in my life. When I was able to move beyond my feelings of difference and instead draw the circle wider, to allow creation to share its overabundance with me when I most needed it. So as a kid growing up in Western Pennsylvania, my grandmother would pay me a nickel for every weed I pulled in her garden. So in that backbeating summer heat, I would mountaineer my way up that really steep slanting garden. I swear it felt like 45 degrees. Her leather gloves falling off my small hands, weed digger in the right, squishy knee rest in the left. I was ready. But in reality, I just tore her garden up. I dug each weed out with heaps of fertile soil along with it, and my best haul probably amounted to maybe $3. But I never left with fewer than 15. She would pretend to be doing other chores while I worked hard, which mostly pertained to just so happening to making some lemonade and quietly following my steps, pulling the little weeds I had overlooked. But every time I finished, I knew there was a "good job, Lizzie," a glass of lemonade, and a strong pat on the shoulder awaiting my pitiful bounty. She probably knew that her green thumb gene passed me right over, but she never once let on. She always had a good excuse to finish up early every afternoon. "It is too hot out here. Why don't you come help me with the border of this puzzle? I think you've got them all. I just can't believe it." Over time, I grew up, and my grandmother's garden no longer required my services. By my mid-20s, I had moved away. I'd started a career, and my beloved grandmother eventually passed away. The winter after she died, I visited her grave for the first time, and all I could bear to do was sit under the big pine tree that set roots next to her headstone. I realized as I was sitting there that it was only fitting for her to have this small piece of nature with her always. Those pesky weeds still poking through the snow, and the roots of the tree deepening around her. She would have liked it that way. And it was not long after that winter and seeing that pine tree and those weeds that I was taking a walk with my roommate's dog around my new neighborhood. I was aimless and still grieving her loss, thinking about those summers in my grandmother's garden. So we were passing rose bushes and all sorts of beautiful azaleas. And as the dog paused to literally smell the roses in that bush, a butterfly flew out and over to me. It landed right here on my left shoulder, just next to my ear. Together, this little insect and I stood for a second or two, not moving 1 inch. On that day, I knew it was another one of my grandmother's pats on the shoulders. I could just feel it. It was as if this small insect was whispering to me, "It's too hot out here. Why don't you come help me with the border of this puzzle? I think you've got them all. I just can't believe it." After another moment, it eventually flitted away, back into the tall bushes. They looked like they could use some tending to, but I smiled and turned knowing that I had enough of my grandmother's nickels to last me a lifetime. And when I think about this moment now, here in church with you all, I like to think that that butterfly was sharing with me, reminding me it's okay to be sad, but also that tomorrow will come. The sun will rise. And we can be grateful for that sun-like love and warmth that we've had, whether that's been with our family, with friends, beloved pets, our gardens. And in fact, we can share that with one another when those around us most need it. When I needed it, this little insect gave me the gift of connection, of a divine recognition of our connectedness to all around us, but also to all those who've gone before us. So my question to you this morning is, how can you be like those flowers in your garden and those insects in your yard? Those flowers that share their overabundance without question, who take the little bit of help when they need it without shame or any embarrassment. We don't have to flatten our differences, the things that make us us, to live into this spirit. It'd be a shame to hide those away. I've got to think that they're there for a reason. So can we recognize when our sense of difference is blotting out our chance to be grateful, not only for what is, but what can be around us? A chance to really feel in our bones that sense of interconnectedness, that ripple of the Spirit. The divine, the Spirit, does not dwell only in the parts of us that are most acceptable or most beautiful or most intriguing to others. That ripple dwells in the totality of who we are, in the totality of creation, including in the gardens in our backyards, or like in my case, the jade plant on my patio. And I'm happy to report that in recent weeks, it's taken a wonderful turn for the better. I gotta ask George for some tips after service. So church, I encourage us to model the way that creation recognizes that we're all connected by our roots on this planet, and that those roots are made for connection, are made for sharing, are made for the collective that we embody as this creation. The ripples of the Spirit connect us to that grand love that surrounds us and is within us always. May it be so, and amen.